Story 1.
It started when Demi Lovato was just 3 years old. A little girl named Emily became her constant companion. But Emily wasn't an ordinary friend, she wasn't alive. Demi grew up in a quiet Texas home, one that seemed normal from the outside. But inside, something unexplainable lingered. It all began when her mom overheard her talking alone in her room. Curious, she peeked in and asked, "Who are you talking to?" Demi, with the innocence only a toddler could have, smiled and said, "My best friend, Emily." At first, her mom thought it was just an imaginary friend, a phase every child goes through. But things soon became unsettling. Demi would often giggle at jokes no one else could hear, or suddenly stop what she was doing to listen to someone. As the weeks went on, her descriptions of Emily became vivid. She had long hair, always wore a dress, and seemed playful, like she was around 11 or 12 years old. Demi's family brushed it off as childhood imagination, until the day strange things began happening around the house. Doors would creak open on their own, objects would move slightly, and cold spots seemed to follow Demi wherever she went. Her mother, though skeptical, couldn't deny the unnerving energy in the house. One day, Demi was sitting at the kitchen table when her mom asked casually, "What does Emily like to do?" Demi paused, tilted her head as if listening, and said, "She likes to play hide and seek." From that day forward, the playful spirit seemed to show herself in more obvious ways. Toys left in one room would end up in another. Lights flickered at random times, and the faint sound of laughter echoed through the halls late at night. It wasn't long before her mom decided to seek help. She invited a medium to visit their home. The medium walked through the house, pausing near Demi's room. "There's a presence here," they said softly. "It's a young girl. She's not harmful. She's just attached." Curiosity grew, and even a team of ghost hunters visited the house to confirm what the family had been experiencing. They reported strange readings and faint, playful giggles recorded on their equipment. It all pointed to one thing: Emily wasn't just in Demi's imagination. Despite the eerie occurrences, Demi never felt afraid. To her, Emily was just a friend, someone who brought comfort during her early years. She wasn't scary, Demi later explained. She was kind, like a big sister watching over me. As Demi grew older, the visits from Emily slowly faded, like a distant memory. But the experience left a mark on her. To this day, she believes Emily was real, a spirit who chose to stay by her side. Now an internationally renowned star, Demi occasionally reflects on her childhood encounter. She doesn't shy away from talking about Emily, even as skeptics dismiss her story. For Demi, the memories aren't scary. They're a reminder of the unexplainable moments that shaped her.
Story 2.
It was supposed to be just another stop on her tour, a quiet detour to a small, eerie cemetery in Kansas. But what Ariana Grande experienced that night left her questioning everything she thought she knew about the supernatural. Stull Cemetery, often called one of the 7 gates to hell, wasn't on their schedule. But curiosity got the best of Ariana and her friends as they decided to visit the infamous site. The moment they arrived, something felt off. The air was heavy, thick with a suffocating silence that even their laughter couldn't break. Walking through the gravestones, Ariana tried to shake off the unease creeping up her spine. But it wasn't just her imagination. The air suddenly smelled like sulfur, sharp and unnatural. Her heart began to race as a single fly buzzed past her ear. Then another, and another. Her friends looked at each other uneasy. "Let's get back to the car," someone suggested, their voice barely above a whisper. Inside the car, they expected to feel safer, but the tension only grew. Ariana felt like something invisible had wrapped itself around her chest, making it harder to breathe. The quiet wasn't comforting, it was deafening, like something was waiting, Desperate to distract herself, Ariana lifted her phone and snapped a quick photo of the cemetery through the car window. "I just need to see if we were imagining this," she muttered, though no one answered. When they finally drove away, the air in the car still felt wrong, like they hadn't really left. That's when Ariana decided to check the photo. Her blood ran cold. Staring back at her were 3 faces, blurred, distorted, and undeniably demonic. Their eyes burned with malevolence, and their twisted mouths seemed to sneer right at her. "Do you see this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Her friends leaned in, and their horrified silence told her they saw it too. Ariana tried to make sense of what had happened. The sulfur, the flies, the oppressive feeling, all signs she'd read about in stories of demonic encounters. She didn't believe in this stuff before, but now? Before they left, Ariana had whispered an apology into the darkness, hoping to make peace with whatever was there. But deep down, she felt like something had followed them, something that didn't want to let go. Even years later, Ariana rarely talks about that night. The haunting photo and the memories of Stoll Cemetery still send chills down her spine. What she experienced wasn't just a creepy story, it was something far darker, something that stayed with her long after they left that cursed ground.
Story 3.
It wasn't a creak in the night or a shadow in the corner that haunted Keanu Reeves as a child. No, it was something much stranger, a chilling sight that stayed with him forever. A jacket, empty and alive, moving on its own like it belonged to someone who was no longer there. The year was 1970 and 6-year-old Keanu was living in a modest home in Sydney, Australia, with his family and their nanny. The house wasn't particularly old or spooky, but there was something about it that felt off. Keanu couldn't explain it back then, but looking back, he recalls how the stillness in certain rooms felt heavier, like the walls were hiding something. One warm summer evening, Keanu was playing with toys in the living room, while his nanny tidied up nearby. The sun had just set, casting long shadows across the walls. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement in the hallway. At first, he thought it was one of his parents walking by, but when he turned to look, his young mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. A white, empty jacket floated through the doorway. It wasn't being carried by anyone. There were no arms, no legs, no body. The jacket moved as if worn by an invisible figure, swaying gently as it passed. The sleeves hung loosely, but the motion was deliberate, purposeful, like whoever wore it knew exactly where they were going. Keanu's wide eyes followed the jacket as it glided silently across the room and disappeared through another door. He froze, unable to speak or move. His heart pounded in his tiny chest and he clutched his toy tightly, trying to convince himself he hadn't just seen something impossible. Breaking the silence, he turned to his nanny who stood motionless, her face pale and her hands trembling. "Did you see that?" Keanu asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The nanny nodded, her expression filled with terror. She didn't say a word, but her reaction confirmed what Keanu feared. It wasn't his imagination. The rest of the evening passed in an eerie silence. Keanu's parents dismissed his story, calling it a child's overactive imagination. But the image of that jacket stayed with him, as vivid as if it had just happened. Even his nanny refused to talk about it again, brushing it off whenever he brought it up. Years later, during an interview with Jimmy Kimmel, Keanu recounted the experience with a mixture of wonder and unease. "I looked at the nanny, and she was terrified," he said, "and I thought, oh wow, so that was real." The memory remains one of the most bizarre moments of his life. Keanu never found an explanation for the ghostly jacket, where it came from, who it belonged to, or why it appeared that night. But the vision of that empty, floating garment has become a part of his story, a mysterious reminder that some encounters defy reason and linger forever.
Story 4.
Sleep should be a sanctuary, a place to rest and recharge. But for Lily Collins, it became a haunting gateway to something unexplainable. While preparing for her role as Elizabeth Klopfer, the girlfriend of infamous serial killer Ted Bundy, inextremely wicked, shockingly evil and vile, her dreams turned into vivid nightmares, or perhaps something more. It began during the early stages of filming. Lily, deeply committed to understanding the story she was about to portray, immersed herself in Bundy's history, his crimes, and the unimaginable pain he caused. But as the days went on, her nights became anything but peaceful. Around 3 a.m. every night, the infamous witching hour, Lily would wake up in a cold sweat. Her heart raced as flashes of horrifying images flooded her mind. Faces of young women, their expressions frozen in anguish, appeared as if they were staring directly at her. These weren't just random nightmares, they felt real. Intensely real. At first, Lily dismissed the visions as the byproduct of stress and long days on set. But the images didn't fade when she opened her eyes. Instead, they lingered, like faint shadows in the corners of her room. It was as though they were trying to communicate with me, Lily later explained. Despite the unsettling experiences, Lily felt no fear, only an overwhelming sense of sadness. I started being woken up by flashes of images like the aftermath of a struggle, she told The Guardian. But I didn't feel scared. I felt supported, like they were saying, "We're here, we're listening. Thank you for telling the story." The connection she felt with these spirits was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was as if the victims wanted their stories told, not just through the lens of history, but through the emotions of someone who could empathize with their pain. Lily leaned into the experience, using it to fuel her performance. As filming progressed, the eerie moments continued. On set, lights would flicker without explanation, and props would mysteriously move from their original positions. Cast and crew joked about the possibility of paranormal activity, but for Lily, the occurrences felt like a sign that she was on the right path. She later revealed that the experience gave her a profound respect for the women who lost their lives to Bundy's crimes. "I think they wanted to remind me of the weight of their story," she said. "It wasn't about fear, it was about honoring their memory." By the time filming wrapped, the nightly visions stopped as abruptly as they had started. Lily interpreted this as a sign of closure, as if the spirits had found peace in knowing their voices were heard. To this day, Lily looks back on the experience with a mix of gratitude and awe. It wasn't just a role for her, it was a journey into something beyond the physical world, a reminder of the unseen connections that linger between the living and the lost. Story 5. Howie Mandel never believed in ghosts. To him, the paranormal was just a collection of exaggerated stories and overactive imaginations. But one chilling experience in his own home made him question everything. It started innocently enough. Howie had recently moved into a sprawling house with his wife and young daughter. It was the kind of place that seemed perfect on paper, spacious, filled with light, and tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. But something about it felt off. The first sign was subtle. Doors that had been shut would be found slightly ajar. Lights flickered occasionally, which Howie chalked up to faulty wiring. But when his daughter began acting strangely, things took a darker turn. One night, as Howie and his wife relaxed in the living room, their daughter came running down the stairs, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "Daddy," she whispered, clutching his arm. "There's a man in my room." Howie's heart stopped. He immediately sprinted upstairs, checking every corner, every closet. The room was empty. "There's no one here, sweetheart," he said, trying to comfort her. But she shook her head vigorously. "He was there. A man with a beard. He was just watching me." Over the next few weeks, her fear only grew. She refused to sleep in her room, claiming the bearded man was always there, standing in the corner, staring. Howie dismissed it as a child's imagination. But then, the au pair began experiencing strange things too. One evening, the au pair was alone in the kitchen when she felt a cold draft sweep through the room. She turned around, expecting to see someone, but there was no one there. Moments later, she saw it. An unmistakable figure standing at the edge of the hallway, half shrouded in shadow. A bearded man. Terrified, she screamed, sending Howie rushing downstairs, but once again the house was empty. The family's unease reached its breaking point when Howie himself experienced something he couldn't explain. Late one night, he woke up to a faint noise, like whispering, coming from the hallway. As he got up to investigate, he felt an icy chill pass through him, freezing him in place. Then he saw it, the silhouette of a man standing at the end of the hall. Howie's logical mind tried to reason it away. "It's just my eyes playing tricks," he thought. But the figure didn't fade. It lingered, watching him, before disappearing into thin air. Shaken, Howie confided in a friend who suggested bringing in a paranormal investigator. Reluctantly, he agreed. The investigator confirmed what Howie feared. The house was indeed haunted. The bearded man was a restless spirit, tied to the property for reasons unknown. Unable to find peace in his own home, Howie made the difficult decision to sell the house. It was the only way to escape the lingering presence that had turned their dream home into a nightmare. Looking back, Howie has shared his story on shows like Famously Afraid, admitting that the experience changed him forever. "I wasn't a believer before," he said, "but sometimes you don't get a choice. The things you see, the things you feel, they make you believe." Story 6. Helena Bonham Carter is no stranger to playing complex, larger-than-life characters, but preparing to play Princess Margaret in The Crown led to an experience she never anticipated. While she expected hours of research and perfecting her performance, what she didn't expect was to have a direct conversation with the spirit of the late princess herself. It all began when Helena, known for her meticulous preparation, felt unsure about whether she was the right person for the role. Princess Margaret was a royal icon, fierce, elegant, and deeply misunderstood. Helena, eager to do justice to her memory, decided to seek advice in an unconventional way. Through a friend, she contacted a psychic medium. It wasn't something Helena had done before, but she figured, why not? It can't hurt to try. The session was held in a quiet, dimly lit room, where the medium invited Helena to ask her questions. At first, there was only silence, but then the medium began to speak, her voice slightly different, more commanding, sharper. "She's here," the medium said softly, referring to Princess Margaret. Helena felt a chill run down her spine. "I need your blessing," she whispered, almost afraid to ask, "Am I the right person to play you?" The medium smiled faintly, then replied in a tone Helena swore wasn't her own. "You're better than the other actress they considered." Helena let out a small laugh of relief, but what came next gave her pause. "Get the smoking right," the spirit insisted. "I smoked in a very particular way, and the cigarette holder wasn't just for smoking, it was an extension of my personality. A weapon for expression. Remember that." Helena nodded, hanging on every word. The spirit went on to share other personal details about her life, her struggles, her pride, and even her mischievous sense of humor. At one point, she offered Helena a piece of advice. "Keep it real. Don't make me too perfect. I wasn't perfect, and I don't want to be remembered that way." The session ended, but Helena couldn't shake the feeling that she genuinely connected with Princess Margaret. Over the next few weeks, she poured her heart into the role, keeping the princess's words in mind. During filming, she made sure every gesture, every cigarette drag, was true to the late royal's personality. But the connection didn't end there. On set, Helena occasionally felt a strange, comforting presence. She described moments where she'd feel a faint breeze in an enclosed space or sense someone standing nearby when no one else was around. It was as if Princess Margaret was quietly watching, ensuring her story was told right. In interviews, Helena shared her extraordinary experience with equal parts awe and respect. "I don't care if people believe me or not," she said. "I felt her there. She wanted her story told, and I think she approved of how I did it." Helena Bonham Carter's portrayal of Princess Margaret became one of the most celebrated performances in The Crown, and for Helena, it was more than just a role. It was a collaboration, one that transcended the boundaries between the living and the dead. Story 7. It wasn't just a passing feeling or a bump in the night. For Kate Hudson and her mother, Goldie Hawn, seeing spirits was a family phenomenon. A gift, or perhaps a curse, that blurred the line between the living and the dead. Kate had always felt different. She could sense when someone was nearby, even if no one was there. She could feel the air shift, a presence lingering in the room, watching. But it wasn't fear that gripped her, it was curiosity. Her earliest memory of the supernatural came when she was a child. She'd wake up in the middle of the night to see faint figures standing at the foot of her bed. They weren't threatening, but their silent gazes made her shiver. She would squeeze her eyes shut and count to 10, hoping they'd vanish. When she opened her eyes, they'd still be there. It wasn't just her imagination. Goldie Hawn, her mom, confirmed it. "You've inherited it," Goldie told her one night after Kate confided in her. "Our family has always been sensitive to the other side." As Kate grew older, her ability became more vivid and more unpredictable. "You're supposed to tell them the truth." That was Goldie's advice when the spirits appeared. Kate didn't understand at first. "What truth?" she asked. "The truth about where they are. They don't belong here anymore," her mom explained. One day, as a teenager, Kate tested this theory. She was home alone sitting in the kitchen when she felt it. A sudden chill that wrapped around her like an icy blanket. Her heart raced, but instead of running, she stood her ground. "You don't belong here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's 1996. You're not supposed to be here anymore." The air seemed to ripple like something unseen was reacting, and then it was gone. But the experiences didn't stop. In her 20s, Kate began seeing spirits more clearly. Their appearances became detailed. An old man in a faded suit, a woman in a long dress with a sorrowful expression. Once, while filming on set, Kate felt a hand on her shoulder only to turn and find no one there. Her most vivid encounter came in an old hotel. She was staying there during a film shoot and couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. One night, she woke up to see a man sitting in the corner of her room, staring out the window. He didn't look at her, he didn't move at all, but the heavy sadness emanating from him was suffocating. Kate followed her mom's advice. "You don't belong here," she said softly. "It's time to go." Slowly, the figure faded, like a shadow dissolving into the light. For Kate, seeing spirits isn't about fear, it's about understanding. She believes these encounters are moments of connection, brief glimpses into a world we can't fully comprehend. "When you see something," she said in an interview, "you're supposed to acknowledge it. That's all they want, acknowledgement." Even now, Kate Hudson approaches the supernatural with a mix of awe and acceptance. For her, the veil between the living and the dead isn't a barrier, it's a bridge.
If these stories made your spine tingle, don't forget to subscribe for more chilling tales, or check out our next video if you're brave enough.